and then I'm going to admit. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our next in our series of technical webinars on the Digital Traffic Regulation Orders Beta project. We've got a packed program today, and the focus of this webinar is going to be on the final preparation for our private beta. We've got expecting about 40 people on the webinar from a variety of technically minded colleagues from across the Traffic Regulation Authority, tool solution provider, and data consumer sectors. And the project team will be talking to you on a number of matters. We've got John Harrod Booth, who will be speaking to you with a reminder about what the data specification is. We've got Gabriel Popescu from the PA consulting team, who will be giving us an update on what is being built for the minimum viable product for the project. And we're expecting Sam Roots from our service design team to be joining us shortly, and he'll be talking to you about the actual private beta onboarding process. Let me just show the that agenda here. So I think that's our introductions from our side and the team. We've got a slightly different lineup than normal. You will have spotted, those of you who've been to our previous webinars. Just to mention for how we'll take questions, there is a chat. Please just use the chat for asking questions about this webinar. Kindly refrain from using it as a platform for pitching your products. We would just like to take questions, and these questions will be we will go through them in the latter part of the webinar and discuss them in a panel Q&A. And then at the end, I'll be giving you a reminder about all our means of contact and everything that's going on. I think, though, just to preface everything, and before we get into the review of the data specification, I'd just like to say that in the last few weeks, obviously in the wake of the general election and the incoming new government, there was some lingering uncertainty about the status officially of the D-TRO project as a whole. But I am pleased to confirm that following new ministers coming in, talking to senior managers, that D-TRO has been given a full clean bill of health and authorised to proceed. So those doubts that we might have expressed in any previous communications, and I mentioned this in email shot that went out to everybody last week, but I think that's important to just say at the top of the shop. At this point, I'd like to hand over to John Harrod Booth, and he is going to talk about the data specification. But just I'm going to just at this point we'd be going on mute and changing the slide so that John can do his bit perfectly. Let me just arrange that.
Thank you, John. Just as a note, Sam Roots is in as a attendee. Okay.
Don't worry, I'll be in the background.
Okay. Right. So I'm going to give you an update in terms of the data specification. I'm not going to do death by 1,000 PowerPoint, so I'm largely going to talk to you about what the status is. You will have seen this slide previously. So this is just the bundle of artifacts that we consider to form the data specification. We've also got the data model itself, which is an enterprise architect UML file, and we provide two versions of that via the GitHub resource. So there's a QEA file, which is a native enterprise architect, and there's also an XMI file. That's obviously for those who like the data modeling aspect of it. There is a data model user guide which aims to explain all of the different concepts in the data model and how they're expected to be populated. We have a JSON schema that's is extracted from the data model, and that obviously is exchangeable format. We have a slim example of the JSON of a JSON file conforming to the JSON schema. We will be in due course producing other examples. And then we have interface control documents which are describing the APIs. There's two that are openly available. There's one which is for the data publishers and one for the data consumers. Quite a lot of the API content of those two is the same, and I'm not going to go through those in great detail, but they're basically designed so if you happen to be a data consumer that you don't see all of the APIs that are to do with publishing D-TRO records. And then finally in the stack we have the validation rules. So we have a set of validation rules that exist, which are not there trying to check the quality and accuracy of the information within the submitted D-TRO records, but rather looking for basic validation errors. So we're obviously checking the data against the schema. Is a date time field? Does a date time field look like a date time field? But also we're checking various other things. But the validation rules will be published, and you will be able to see that they're not particularly over prescriptive. Next slide, please. So the status at the moment is we've published all of that content. It's moved from the private DFT GitHub repository onto the public one now, and so that's openly accessible to everybody. If you're not, on the unlikely case on this call, if you're not familiar with GitHub, you can get a GitHub username and account free from GitHub itself, and you will need that in order to be able to access the DFT D-TRO GitHub repository, but that's all fairly straightforward. The current stack of artifacts are all based upon a data model version, which is 3.2.1, and the expectation is that that will form the basis for the deployments within private beta. Of course, we expect and encourage all organizations to review those, and if you have any comments or you have any queries, or indeed say I found an error, then please let us know. Our primary route for letting us know about those issues is via the issues ability within GitHub, so those issues will be openly visible to everybody. But also it's possible to do it by email to the D-TRO at dft.gov.uk email address. Just by way of comment on the comments we've received so far, so we've received in recent times two sets of comments, one coming from Appyway and another set coming from Derby City Council. The Appyway comments, somebody's obviously done a very thorough review, and thank you very much for that. They're largely identified matters of consistency between the data model user guide, and the JSON schema. On review, I personally would say most of those matters of consistency are relatively minor, although of course any inconsistency causes an issue, so we'll have to clarify what should be considered to be the correct way of doing things. But those comments have been subject to initial review, and we will process them in due course and provide feedback. And the intention is to do that all visibly on the GitHub resource. Obviously, just having looked through those comments, there are some comments of matters of inconsistency just when we've produced the documentation and updated it over time. And so it's quite likely that we'll produce a new version of the data model user guide as a primary form of update, and then make comments on the GitHub resource about any inconsistencies that might exist between the data model and the data schema. We will also, of course, consider when we should be doing a future additional release. But initially, having discussed with my DFT colleagues and PA colleagues, we're not minded to rush to do that, because the comments that we've received so far are relatively minor in nature. So most of what you have in the 3.2.1 release can be considered to be valid for the baseline for private beta. We'll discuss with obviously internally, but also with you, the stakeholders, about when it's most appropriate to do an update to that release and incorporate any future changes. And that's likely to be some way through the private beta process. We've also had comments from Tim at Derby City Council, which are very welcomed. And he has challenged the way that the geospatial data is encoded within the data specification. The approach that the data specification represents seeks to align with HM government policy and guidance, but obviously we are keen to try to find the best way and optimal ways to try to address this problem. And we're very happy to review this and go and seek wider opinion. It's been suggested, and in fact I've suggested to DFT for a while, that we should go and talk to the Geospatial Commission to get their views on best practice, and also to try and seek alignment with other similar services. But I should say we are very happy to take these inputs. The challenge coming from Tim is very welcomed, and indeed inputs from others are also very welcomed. Obviously, any future releases of the data specification will then reflect the outcomes of those discussions, but it's quite reasonable to assume that we will fairly soon have a live issue on the GitHub resource discussing this topic and taking comments via that channel. With both of those sets of comments, that they were both received by email, we'll go through a process of producing a summarized version of those to put up on GitHub as both the issues that have been raised and also the responses. But you are heavily encouraged to raise comment if you see issue. Obviously, I'm referring to the comments on in terms of the data specification, but comments more generally are also welcomed. But please, preferably by using the DFT's public GitHub issues mechanism. And that was all I was going to say.
Thanks very much, John. Just let me switch the slide. We'll be handing over in a sec to Gabriel, who's going to run through a bit on the build. Just to say, please do use the chat. There seem to be one or two people who are struggling getting in at this point, but I'm hopefully going to get them in properly pretty soon. And I think that Sam may be available now as a presenter on the webinar. He'll be coming up next after Gabriel, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So at this point, it's over to Gabriel, who will be telling you all what we've been building.
Okay, thank you, JC. If you want to go to the next slide. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. So on this slide, I know there is a lot of wording, but let me go through them because I believe it's important for us to be clear on how we're going to do the build and what are the updates. So our timescale for the MVP build are to be at the end of the month, but then it will be followed by testing and private beta basically will happen mid to late September. Also, one of the other updates that we are doing it with the D-TRO is the configuring GCP data platform to host and provision the data, including the setting up test environments and conduct the testing. We have different environments and different way of testing each of these environment. For the API development, we are creating updated endpoints to publish and update TROs. And this includes Apigee, which I'm sure many of you know. It's a Google API Manager platform that will provide secure and traceable access for those required to publish. I know there was one of the question how this is going to be accessed by any of you. So we have a secure way of accessing this API, and will be traceable. We will know exactly which TRA it's accessing and which data consumer or data publisher will access. Also, as we speak, we are going through end-to-end testing through and through to make sure that the validation and semantic data model it's passed and everything it's correct. And also the plan for the private beta launch will be to provide an updated data specification address feedback provided so far, with a few more samples to check other types of TRO, for instance, temporary TROs. So all of this will be there, so we can have hopefully in faster pace feedback from you and feedback from the one accessing the system of what is happening and how we can improve, how can this be done better. So these are the design and build update. I'm sure many of you know that it's an ongoing process. It's iteration, and sometimes you have to do it over and over again until you're mastering it. But we are sure on the track to provide this service to you. So that is my update. Thank you very much, all of you, and thank you, JC. Over to you.
Thanks, Gabriel. I think we've sorted the problem with the people that were missing. We've got them in. Going to be handing to Sam, who's going to talk hopefully about the onboarding processes that we've got for D-TRO Private Beta. I can see, Sam, you're now on camera and you're ready to go. So let me just get back to the presentation, and I will share the correct slide. Okay, over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much. Just to make sure you can hear me, is that all right? You can hear me all right? Oh, hang on.
Yes, we
can.
Okay, good. So hopefully, actually, I did drop a slide into this deck. So would you mind just, there we go. So I can just talk over this. Here is our proposed timeline for private beta. Some of these dates might be subject to a little shift either way. But what we'll have is, as Gabriel mentioned, we've got our sort of build version 1 will be concluding in the coming weeks, and then we'll have some testing and assurance processes to do, sort of security type testing. And then what we'll be doing in the coming week from now is inviting our private beta participants with a set of instructions and to set your expectations for what private beta actually means. And what we'll be doing as we move towards private beta is so we're going to be treating different user groups a little bit differently. So for folks who have a digital who are digital solution providers, so the likes of Appiway and OneNet and so on, and people who are providing that software platform for a traffic authority, we'll be onboarding private beta users a few weeks before that launch date for private beta, which we expect will be in the week of the 23rd of September. What we're hoping is that we can give people access to a test environment to be able to test that they can use the publish functions and that the data validation process is working properly, so that everyone can meet the data specification. And that means that when we get to the point of onboarding the traffic authorities, we'll create a link between each of the respective DSPs so that then you can post to the database on behalf of the TRA. What that functionally means is that the TRA can use the software that they have and then be able to post to publish to the database as themselves. To enable this, I think someone's mentioned already, each of the live API keys will be associated with a specific TRA. So for private beta, that linking process is going to be a manual process that somebody on our side does, and we'll look at how that process can be refined over the course of the next few months. As I say, we'll formally launch private beta on or near Monday, the 23rd of September. I think the proposed date was originally Friday the 20th, might get pushed to the following Monday. As I say, we will hope to have onboarded most of the users as above, so we can kick off with the full user group for the duration of private beta. And then during that beta period, we're going to be sending out user experience surveys, and we might invite certain users to engage in research interviews to help us iterate and improve the service. Obviously, the point of a beta phase is to gather evidence and information on how things are really working, whether we can improve it and how we should iterate it. And that evidence is really important to make sure the service is as good as it can be when we get to public beta and we open out the service user group. So private beta is going to run for about 6 weeks. And at the end of the private beta phase, we have something called GDS assessment. So this is run with the standards in mind for government digital services, making sure that everything is up to scratch in terms of the process, the people, and the technology. And it's the evidence that we're gathering in private beta that's going to help us demonstrate that all of those standards are met. So the expectation is that we'll be able to keep the service on and roll straight into public beta and onboard more users as we go into November and beyond. So that's the roundup from me, but I'm happy to go into any of the details as far as I can.
Thanks, Sam. I think perhaps maybe can we just perhaps just touch on what materials we'll be making available? Is there some guidance coming that for people being onboarded into private beta? I know that we've had various requests over the weeks and months for when will we know what we have to do and stuff like that. So I think we've got a full schedule of publication of stuff. No need to go into too much specifics, but let's just reassure people what we will be providing.
Absolutely. So there will be that invitation email to private beta that will confirm. So when you receive it, you'll know that you are a private beta participant, and that email will contain instructions for, as I say, it's a set of instructions and expectations for anyone who is going to be participating in private beta. And we're going to make sure that depending on the type of user you are, so if you're a traffic authority or a solution provider or a traffic authority with an in-house tech team, that you will receive the appropriate set of words, so you know exactly what you need to do when and what you can expect in terms of comms from us over the course of the beta phase. As we go through beta, we will be developing more, let's say, formal set of guidance that will accompany the documentation for the API. So that guidance is something a bit like, so imagine if you go onto a GDS service like Renew My Passport, you have the service itself, and then you have a set of accompanying guidance. We'll create that over the course of private beta, and we'll ask people to ask the beta participants to work with us to make sure that the wording and the content is exactly the kind of thing that would help someone like you, in whatever situation you might be. But for the participants of private beta, all the information you should need will be in that initial that email. Alongside that, of course, we have the documentation, which I think is already available.
That's great. I think that is fine to explain where we are. There may be some questions in the chat on some other aspects. Speaking of which, let me just flick forward. We are now going to go into the Q&A. We will deal with these with the most appropriate person available. Going to the top, Eliza at Causeway has asked a question which has come up before about when will we be providing those additional JSON example files. I should just say that we have been drafting an update to the FAQ. It's going to be published quite soon, and this question is on there, and we do accept that it's a good idea for us to provide some more examples, but perhaps Gabriel or John is the best person to just add a bit more light on that one. Who would like to take it most? Is it John is going to just let us have a bit more insight on that one?
So I'm just making sure that we don't conflict in terms of microphones because we're actually sat alongside each other. So we've been discussing both in terms of the JSON example for TTROs, but also more generally the sort of suite of examples that we would require. We've been discussing over the last couple of weeks, and so PA are going to be starting to pull that together. In terms of sense of timeline, I can't be specific at this point because those discussions are still ongoing. I don't know whether we can say it'll be within the next two weeks. I wouldn't have thought so, but we will certainly go away and get confirmation. I think it's the best I can give on that at the moment. But we've been looking at the sort of broad coverage of all of the different types of TRO that will be flowing through the service and trying to provide coverage of the examples of those.
Thanks, John. I don't know if Gabriel can answer a bit more from the dev side on the timeline for being able to provide additional examples.
Yeah, so what we have now, we have a set of examples, temporary TROs and permanent TROs as well, and I believe we are able to provide some of the examples in 2 weeks. I think it's a fair time, so we want to make sure that there are some generic things that we do, but I believe we will be able to provide some TTROs and permanent TROs in 2 weeks as examples.
Thanks. That's great to hear, Gabriel. We will get that into the FAQ draft before it goes up, so that's documented. Just moving on now through the questions, not that it's the Causeway show, but we have got another question from Causeway about JSON and TTROs, but it's about when should we expect the API URLs. I think you've touched on this in your little bit, Gabriel, but perhaps you want to just remind on that. And then the other thing, there's a question about authentication. Are we supposed to authenticate with specific TRA user and report the TTROs for them specifically, or a single user, one.network, and report all of the TTROs like that?
So the platform, the Google Apigee, has a way of knowing, so to speak, who's gonna to be logged in, and obviously it's gonna be an API key that it's unique for you. So if you're data consumer or data publisher, it doesn't matter. We'll be able to differentiate it, but it will not be the standard username and password to access the API. Will be an API key. Although in order for you to get to Google, you will probably have to do it normal way by SSO or username and password. That will be the way of approaching of authentication and authorization, and based on your credential, we will know which level which level you have, so we will know exactly which endpoints you will have available to consume. On the other question of the JSON, I believe you were asking, so when should we have a URL for this, pre-production and test and so on. As I said, we will be able to open the private beta mid or late September, as Sam said. So we will have that URL available for you, so you will be able to access it, because by that time we will know, and we have some testing to do. We will know how to onboard you and how to access those endpoints. So those are the time, mid-late September, for you to have those URLs, and by that time you will be able to log in and have the right API key.
Yeah, thanks. I think we are exploring options for a limited pre-release of these URLs, but that has to be done in the context of ensuring that there's security and everything, and the things have been tested. So we need to make sure that if we make anything available before official private beta, that it is all legit and has been properly sanctioned. So we're working on that now. Just moving on through the questions, there's one from Tim, who JHB name checked in his presentation. This is about GeoJSON and why, as a file type, it has been dropped. And then there's some technical points about the various types of GeoJSON. And JHB, do you want to give us a quick update on that in easily understandable terminology?
I'll certainly try. I take the point, Tim, and I'm not. It's a bit of a strange situation because we're in a webinar here. So if it would be helpful to have a follow-up meeting, I know Paul Chandler has spoken to you direct. Part of the reason for dropping GeoJSON was if you follow your way through the HM government guidance on various topics, you end up being cornered somewhat as to what sort of solutions you can use. There is government guidance that says if the geospatial data set is primarily centered on the British Isles, or should I say Great Britain, then you should be using British National Grid as the baseline. You quite rightly say it's possible to embed British National Grid within GeoJSON. If you look at the 2016 version, yes, it's possible to do that if the user community is closed and agreed. And I suppose that's the point of challenge, which is the user community closed and did we all agree? Arguably, it's not closed because this is going to be public data. So that I know, and I would welcome the opportunity to talk to the Geospatial Commission to get their view on the best way to handle that. They may well say, go GeoJSON and British National Grid, and we just state that's what it is. But we really need that discussion. I've been pushing for that discussion for a while. But as it stands at the moment, the data specification tries to work with the constraints that we have, apparently from HM government policy and guidance. So we may well change it, and I'd say watch this space, but we need to have those discussions.
Thanks, John. There are some questions that are more about discussion between TRAs, and I do commend those to you about the use of various products, including ArcGIS, Esri, and their ability to create APIs. So I won't specifically address them. I would say that there is a question in the FAQ about software and other related ones, and we've tried to address what the department's position is on software. There's a point about the use of something called a WFS. John is nodding very knowledgeably on this, and so I think he's The question is, I'd like to ask whether there's been a discussion on the use of WFSs. We could easily expose all our data to you, negating the need to transfer anything. So over to you.
As part of the previous alpha project, there was a piece of work done that was looking at the basic architectural configuration of how the service should be deployed, and I suppose trying to keep it on a very simplistic level, whether that should be a federated approach where each of the data suppliers makes their data available and in some way it's coordinated in the center, or whether data should be sent to the center to then be forwarded on and provisioned to data users. And the outcome of that analysis said the latter, so that there should be a centralized service. I think the use of web feature services basically fits the former model more than the latter. I suppose there may be some discussion of whether, rather than it being a push mechanism, it could be a pull mechanism. I guess we can have those discussions in due course. The configuration does match the outcome of the analysis that we had done in the earlier projects. So, again, if discussions, if it would be beneficial to have discussions, very happy to do so.
Thanks, John. I think we'll be adding WFS to the glossary. Still time for us to get that in before we commit it to publication. There's a question again from Eliza about, we noticed in the schema that there are no regulation types for temporary, only for permanent and moving. How do we map them, e.g. for a road closure? And I'm thinking that's another question for you, John. I'm back to you.
Yeah, I think the first statement is we don't assume that the data model and the schema are necessarily perfect. There may well be examples where people come along and say you're missing some sort of regulation type that we necessarily need. So it would be very useful to get some input. If you think you have a list of that sort of nature, Eliza, then please let us know. I'm more than happy to consider it and figure out what should be done with that.
Thanks. And again, I commend the GitHub to anybody that wishes to raise formally a point of order on the development of any part of the service. It is quite new, but it is now fully open, and we don't have to worry about whether or not people are going to get indecently removed from it, which was a bit of a bugbear for a while. There's another acronym here about BNG, and that has left me stumped as well. But perhaps that's another JHB point, and we're then nearly reaching the end of the what's in the chat so far. But John, is BNG something for you?
Very simple, British National Grid.
Again, we'll add that into the glossary. I believe we've got OSGB in the glossary already, but we'll add, which probably mentions in the definition British National Grid. So we'll get that one in too. We have had various people asking for us to clarify quite a lot of the terminology, and we're hoping that the glossary will be suitable for everyone. Perhaps most of the people on this call, the terminology would not be quite so mysterious, but on the last webinar held last week, with hundreds of people on, there were some people asking for what various terms mean. So we're trying to keep ahead on the terminology on there. I think at this point, we'll let the chat and questions still percolate through, but I'm going to switch the slide on to cover off myself a bit on engagement, and then on the other things that we've have for you to get in touch with us, just as a reminder of everything that's that we have on offer. So A reminder, a plug again for the public GitHub. We have added a link to public GitHub on the TTF website. It was also in the mail shot to hundreds of people last week. And we do have a next planned full webinar on the 11th of September. We will probably be organising another technical webinar though, but that date is TBC. We don't have that one yet. We are aware that for the remainder of August at least, it's largely a holiday season. We planned the next webinar on the 11th of September so that it was going to align with the launch of private beta, and perhaps we'll be fitting in the next technical webinar on or around a similar date so that we also get that one in before the private beta start date. And then just a reminder of the conferences that are coming up. We've got Highways UK and the TTF autumn conference. They're in October and November. Moving on, there's plenty of ways to get in touch with us, and that includes just being able to read the website, which is at the TTF website. And we are formally a working group of the Transport Technology Forum, don't forget. So actually at that event in November, there's going to be a formal update as part of the working group reviews that go on at those events. If you've been to a TTF event, you'll know what I'm talking about. We'll continue to make regular announcements by our mailing list, and there's a way of signing up formally to the working group. I expect most of you here are already in the working group, but at that link above, there's a form where you can ask to be joined to the working group. That lets TTF know that you're interested, and they pass the information on to us, and we manage a wider mailing list. We've got the YouTube channel where these recordings of these webinars go, and we've got the new public GitHub. And we do prefer, as we've said already, that formal comments go on the GitHub ideally, because they automatically are then visible by everyone else, and it can stimulate a wider discussion. I think John might have alluded to this earlier, but we are going to try and curate some of the off GitHub comments into GitHub issues. Not necessarily, we won't be calling out anybody that's raised those questions. We'll be raising them as more generic questions, just so that others can see what the questions are that have been raised, and any formal conclusions on them is properly documented in full. This all will help us when we come to that assessment that Sam mentioned, this big GDS assessment that is fundamental to being able to proceed with the project. We need to be able to prove that we've done all in our powers to engage with everyone across the board at a variety of levels of technical ability. And we are on the quirkier side of services that get put before GDS. As Sam said, typically they will be public aligned services that go through that kind of assessment. So we, as a API first service, we have a bit more of a battle in convincing GDS that what we're doing is the right way of doing it. And because it's not so visible and there isn't a shiny big public facing interface, we have to prove to them about all the other stuff we've done. Finally, there's a reminder of the D-TRO mailbox. At this point, I'm going to just leave that slide up so you can take down any notes you've got. And I'll come back to the chat because there's probably been a few extra things that have gone in. Yeah, so there's a question here from Gonzalo and from Curb IQ, and he says, is there a plan to associate D-TROs with curb and road assets through the data model. Typically, signage is managed in separate asset management systems, even though they are interdependent. Many authorities are keen on integrating their asset management systems with the new D-TRO management systems. So we're wondering if the data model will facilitate that. I'll just say a little bit, and I'll probably then hand to John to talk about the data model on this one. I would probably say that at the moment, with the desire to build to a minimum viable product, that this type of additional feature isn't in the MVP. But during the life of a full agile project, which can go through many years of being in beta, we would continually review items in our backlog that would be nice to have to add, and it's always good to hear of new ideas of what can be put in. I'll hand to John, and he could talk perhaps a bit more about how we see the worth of something like this and what the challenge would be in terms of doing data model alignments to facilitate it. So over to you, John.
Not wishing to sound like a politician, it's thank you for that question. Those who have been around this activity for a while will remember the first version of the data model that we drafted some time ago, and actually recognise that had that feature there. It was very basic, but it had the concept there of creating a linkage across to the physical asset. As part of the ongoing work within the D-TRO activity, DFT constantly has to check and challenge the scope of what it's doing and how it relates to other initiatives and how it relates to the overall suite of DFT initiatives, and also the level of burden that it will cause to the users of the service, particularly those who are inputting data, of course. So it is a topic that has been discussed within the scope of the minimum viable product. At this stage for the beta, it's out of scope, but it is a subject that we've looked at in the past and are interested to potentially review in the future. It takes us into interesting territory because it's a territory where actually there are levels of standardization that exist, but that deployment of that standardization across the industry is not commonly adopted. So again, in principle, it's something that could be done, but it would be quite a long path to achieve an outcome. I know DFT have discussed the idea of producing digital twins for the road network at many levels, and that obviously would link across to this, but within the scope of what we are currently doing, it is out of scope.
Thanks, John. I was just thinking of some other work that the DFT done while John was on there. We did the curbside management discovery a year or two ago, and I believe a report is publicly available on that. It may say something on potential link ups with other stuff. We will try to dig out the link and post it. Just a word that the chat on these DFT webinars should live on after the end. So there is scope to still ask questions. We'll do our best to add them into the FAQ. We are updating the FAQ on a kind of a rolling basis though, so it isn't possible always immediately to get questions that come in the next update. We're continually working on it, basically. There are some more comments on JSON and file formats in the chat. Perhaps it's all part of the original thing, and we will try to consolidate everything into our latest approved position rather than going through each of the detailed things right now. don't see any more comments in the chat. Just a word that we will get the, so if you missed anything, you came in late or were otherwise indisposed, we will put the recording on the channel. We will interrogate what we've said both in the chat in answering and what we've said in person, and that will all be filtered through into the updates of the FAQ. There is a question from Mark now about also about geospatial. Is there a reason why, if we have our own in-house geospatial solution for TROs, DFT aren't providing an R or Python library for transforming that data and instead forcing us to use a DSP? I will just put a bit of an answer on this one, but perhaps before handing to probably Gabriel on the whys and wherefores of those more technical aspects. I think we would say that the intention of D-TRO is not to force a particular solution upon anyone. We know of some TRAs pushing ahead with using an in-house solution, whereas others who may already be with a DSP have it covered off that way. It's not our intention to force anybody into using a DSP though. Gabriel, is there anything to say on the use of the libraries that have been mentioned?
Just R and Python library. I know they're very commonly used, but we've been using state-of-the-art, cutting-edge technology. You know, ASP.NET Core, latest technology for creating these services. So let me assure you that this will be fast and swift, and that's why we're using JSON. I'm sure many of you knows that is the easiest way of transporting data. So I think on the back of a little bit of what JHB said earlier is we had an alpha project, so we moved on with the same technology, but we are not against any other technology. We just assess that this is the best technology to continue to use and to implement this service.
Great, thanks, Gabriel. I knew you'd have a good answer there. Okay, well, we are nearing our time up, and I don't see any more questions in the chat. Just to recap, we will be working out a date for a next technical webinar, probably around about the time of the other main webinar. We'll be getting all our ducks in a row with regard to the onboarding information, and an email will be coming out very soon to anybody that we've identified or has volunteered for being a private beta participant with the full instructions. And the technical build continues apace so that we'll be ready in time to let you see the endpoints and for work to let you actually be active on them, with a sub-task of working out whether there's any chance of letting in people ahead of the formal private beta launch in order to give them the best chance to explore, subject to our in-house security and other clearances that would enable us to do that. So I'd like to thank everybody, all our speakers, and commend you to our extensive array of information, and drop us anything else in the chat on our GitHub or via our email, and we'll see you again at the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.